I don't like to talk about my mother. Most people, when they mention their moms, do so with warmth or at least some fondness. But not me. My mother wasn't just neglectful, or cruel, she was something much worse. I don't know what she was, but she wasn't human. Not really. The earliest memory I have of her is from when I was 4. I had a stuffed rabbit, my favorite toy in the world. I slept with it every night, carried it everywhere, whispered my little secrets into its worn-out ears. One day, I woke up to find it missing. I searched everywhere, crying so hard I could barely see. When I finally asked my mother if she had seen it, she just stared at me, her lips curling into a slow, deliberate smile. Then, she reached behind her back and pulled out my rabbit, except it was wrong. Its fur had been burned away in patches, its button eyes melted, its stuffing torn and spilling out like tiny white guts. "You shouldn't love things so much," she said, dropping it at my feet like a dead animal. That was the first time I felt something I wouldn't understand until much later, real fear. Fear of her. As I got older, the things she did became worse. She never hit me. That would have been too simple. My mother liked to play games that left no bruises but made me feel like I was going insane. Once, I woke up to find my bedroom door missing. Just gone. The walls were smooth where it should have been, as if there had never been a door at all. I screamed and pounded on the wall until my hands bled. Hours later, maybe even a full day, I don't know, the door was just back. No explanation. No acknowledgement. Then there was the time she convinced me I was dead. I was about 10. She told me, very calmly, that I had died in my sleep the night before. That I was just a ghost now, and no one could see or hear me. I laughed at first, thinking she was joking. But then she ignored me. Completely. My mother never ignored me. When I cried and begged her to stop, she only looked past me, through me, like I wasn't there. She went on like that for 3 days, never speaking to me, never looking at me. I started to believe her. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping, just sat in the corner of my room, feeling myself dissolve. When she finally let me be alive again, I wasn't the same. I never would be. The worst thing, though, was the mirror game. It happened when I was 16. By then, I avoided her as much as I could. I stayed late at school, spent weekends at friends' houses, did whatever I could to be anywhere but home. But one night, I came home late, and she was waiting for me in the darkened living room, her hands resting on the arms of the chair like a queen on a throne. "Come sit," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. I didn't want to, but I obeyed. She pulled out an old, handheld mirror and handed it to me. "Look into it," she instructed. I hesitated but did as I was told. At first, everything seemed normal. Just my face staring back, pale and tired. But then, the reflection moved, blinked, out of sync with me. My heart stopped. "Keep watching," my mother whispered. Her voice was thick with something almost like excitement. In the mirror, my reflection smiled. But I didn't. Then, slowly, it raised a hand. My hand. But not at the same time. My real hand stayed still in my lap, trembling, while the other version of me reached up and placed a single finger against her lips. Shoo! I threw the mirror across the room. It shattered, but I swore I heard laughter echo from the shards. My mother just sighed, shaking her head like I had disappointed her. I left that night. Ran away and never looked back. I don't know what she was. I don't want to know. But sometimes, when I pass a mirror in a dark room, I swear I see something move, just a fraction of a second too late. And I hear my mother's voice, whispering, "Shoo." I tried to build a normal life, far away from her, but the nightmares never stopped. Even in the daylight, shadows moved in ways they shouldn't, and reflections lingered in mirrors long after I turned away. Then, one night, I saw her on the news. A breaking report flashed across the screen: woman barricades herself in home, threatening to kill her children. My stomach twisted as her face appeared, older but unmistakable. The same cold, knowing eyes. My mother. Police sirens wailed in the background of the footage, red and blue lights casting eerie glows against the house I had grown up in. A police officer spoke on camera, his voice grim. She claims they aren't her children. Says they were replaced by something else. We're trying to get them out safely. Replaced. The word sent ice down my spine. I barely had time to process before my phone buzzed. An unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. A whisper, so familiar, slithered through the speaker. Come home. I dropped the phone, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I couldn't go back. I wouldn't. But the whispers never stopped. That night, my bathroom mirror cracked on its own, a thin spiderweb of fractures spreading outward like grasping fingers. In the reflection, I saw something standing behind me. Smiling. It wasn't me. And it whispered, "Shoo." The phone lay on the floor, the screen flickering, the call still active. I could hear the whispering, soft, insidious, curling through the speaker like smoke. My mother's voice, barely above a breath. Come home. I kicked the phone away as if it might bite me. The screen went black. I didn't sleep that night. Every shadow in my apartment felt wrong. The mirror in my bedroom, the one I had covered with a sheet years ago, had shifted. A sliver of glass peeked out, reflecting just enough for me to see something move within it, just a fraction of a second behind my own motion. Then the news came. The police were outside my childhood home, negotiating with my mother. The live footage played on every channel, flashing red and blue lights, officers with weapons drawn, a negotiator speaking into a megaphone. My mother's voice came through garbled audio. They aren't my children, she was saying. They were replaced. My stomach clenched. I could barely hear over the rush of blood in my ears. They took my babies, she continued, her voice rising. And you're all blind to it. They aren't real. None of this is real. Then, a sound, something that didn't belong in the world of logic. A wet, guttural laugh, low, scraping, almost inhuman. Not my mother. The camera feed cut out. I don't remember making the decision to leave, but suddenly I was in my car, speeding toward that cursed house. I had sworn I'd never go back. But something pulled me forward, something deeper than fear. A tether I had never severed. As I neared the neighborhood, I saw the flashing lights from blocks away. Officers had formed a perimeter. Neighbors gathered behind barricades, their faces a mixture of curiosity and horror. I pulled over. My hands trembled as I stepped out. Before I could get any closer, an officer stopped me. "Miss, you can't be here." "That's my mother," I said. My voice barely sounded like my own. "I used to live there." The officer hesitated. He was young, with tired eyes and a jaw clenched too tight. "You don't want to be involved in this." But I already was. I always had been. A scream split the night. The house shuddered. I saw it with my own eyes, the entire structure trembled, as if something underneath it, inside it, was stretching against its seams. The windows darkened, like ink spilling across the glass. Another scream, childish, high-pitched. Not my mother. "The kids," someone shouted. "Get the kids out." Officers moved toward the house, but the front door slammed shut on its own. Not like the wind had caught it, like something inside had decided it should stay closed. An officer reached for the handle, but the metal burned his hand. He stumbled back, cursing. Then, my mother's voice came through the walls. "She's here." Every officer turned to look at me. A static crackled through the air, an unnatural hum that made my teeth ache. The porch light flickered erratically. And then. Click. The front door swung open. They told me not to go inside, but I barely heard them. My legs carried me forward, my body moving before my mind could stop it. The house smelled wrong. Damp, rotting wood, something acrid and metallic beneath it. The wallpaper peeled in strips, revealing something dark underneath, not wood, not plaster. Something breathing. The children were in the corner of the living room. A boy and a girl, maybe 7 or 8. They clung to each other, wide-eyed and trembling. They weren't crying. They were too scared to cry. My mother stood over them. Her back was to me, her body unnaturally still. "Mom," I whispered. She turned slowly. Too slowly. Her face wasn't right. Her features were there, the sharp cheekbones, the thin lips, but the skin was wrong. It rippled, like something beneath it was shifting. Her eyes, once an icy blue, were black. Not just the irises, the whole sclera, pits of endless night. She came, my mother said, her voice full of something I had never heard before. Satisfaction. The walls flexed. The shadows lengthened. The mirrors, every mirror in the house, shuddered. I could feel them watching. "She's ready," my mother whispered. Then, the children screamed. The mirror in the hallway cracked, a jagged lightning bolt splitting down its center. My reflection stood inside it, staring at me. No. Not me. It smiled. The same smile I had seen when I was 16. And then. It stepped out. Not like glass breaking. Not like a thing emerging. One moment it was trapped behind the silvered surface, and the next, it was standing beside me. I felt a chill against my skin. My own face, looking at me, a beat too late. Blinking, breathing, a fraction of a second out of sync. I stepped back. It stepped forward. "I missed you," it said, in my voice. But the mouth didn't move quite right. Behind me, my mother let out a ragged, gasping laugh. The officers burst through the door. Gunshots rang out. Glass exploded. The air filled with a wailing, unnatural noise. The walls bent inward, shadows pouring out like thick, black tar. The children were screaming. The officers were screaming. And my reflection was still smiling. Then everything went dark. I woke up outside. The house was gone. Not burned. Not collapsed. Gone. The lot was an empty, barren patch of earth, the grass dead, the soil cracked. The officers stood around, silent, their faces pale. No one spoke about what had happened inside. The children were safe. My mother wasn't found. Not her body. Not a trace. But that night, in my motel bathroom, I caught my reflection watching me. A fraction of a second too late. And when I turned away, I swear I heard it whisper. "Shoo."